Welcome to the Bluebird wool painting tutorial. So today we're going to create this Bluebird wool painting with wet felting and needle felting techniques. So there's your colors of wool you'll need, and then some wet felting supplies. I have mesh, foam roller, soap bar, warm soapy water, a towel, and then we'll get started. So laying out your project, we're going to lay it out in thin layers. So for the first layer, you want to lay your fibers going left to right. So pull small pieces of roving and lay them out left to right. And then the second layer, you want the fibers going up and down. And for the third layer, we're going to add a little bit more color, a little bit of a darker red color here and there. You just want to make sure you have even thin layers. I usually do 3 to 4 layers. So then we're going to add some more detail for our painting here. So this is going to be a tree branch. So I'm taking some brown wool, and you can twist it actually to make it a little bit thinner. And just laying out kind of a shape of a tree branch. And then we'll work on our bluebird. So this is the white of the belly of the bird. So you just want to use real small thin pieces of wool. Now I'm blending a little bit of brown and like a gold color together, and that gives a nice goldish brownish color of the bluebird. And all I'm doing is laying out this wool, just small pieces, approximately where it's going to go. If you're using my kit, you'll have a template so you know the sizing of the bluebird. This total piece is approximately 8 to 10 inches square. So the bluebird is facing to the right, so right there I'm working on the tail feather. And then we're going to start the wet felting process. We just laid out the basic details of the bluebird, and we'll add more needle felting details later. So you want to lay your mesh over top of the whole project, and then start soaking it down with your warm soapy water. You just need a tiny bit of soap. And I add a little bit more soap with my soap bar over top. And then you would just want to gently start to agitate the whole project. I like to lift off and make sure nothing's moved. But I'm going a lot slower than this really in real life. You just want to start slow and then increase your agitation as you work more on the project. So this is the first step to felt it, doing this by hand. I just like to use my hands at this point, and then we'll go to the rolling process. Now make sure to watch the How to Wet Felt video if you haven't yet to get all the specific details. And you can find that on my YouTube channel, How to Wet Felt, and I'll give you step-by-step instructions for the rest of this project, for the wet felting process. Now once you've completed the rolling part of wet felting, then we're going to finish the wet felting portion. First we're going to use our hands again, but this time without the mesh. I'm just going to agitate the whole project. At this point you should be able to pinch and pull on it, and the wool should be sticking together as one piece. If you have fibers pulling apart, you need to felt it more with your roller. Or there's also like bamboo placemats that you can use to felt. There's many different wet felting techniques. And this is just my process I use. So after felting it with your hands, we'll move on to fulling. Now if you have a lot of soap, you might want to rinse out at this stage. For the fulling, this actually helps your piece shrink and felt completely. So I use a little roller. This is actually a hard cardboard tube wrapped in plastic. You can also do it by picking your piece up and throwing it down on your surface. I like to use the roller first and flip it over on each side, each direction, and do this for a little while. And then I like to roll it on itself and roll it between my hands. This is just a quick overview of the wet felting process. Again, make sure to watch the how to wet felt video for step-by-step instructions on how to wet felt. And you can find the link below in the description. So now that I've folded this piece, you need to rinse it completely and make sure it's completely dry before you start needle felting. So for needle felting, we're going to add the details to the Bluebird and make it actually look like a Bluebird. So you're going to need felting needles. I like to use a 36 triangle and then a 40 spiral. These are the colors of wool I'll be using today to finish the project. So I'm going to start working on the details of the face. So the eye, the beak. So I'm taking a little bit of black wool and I balled it up, just a little tiny circle, and place it kind of in the center of the head. And then I'm going to use a little bit of white wool and just edge it around this eye. Just a tiny little bit. Make sure you're using a finer felting needle like a 40 spiral, 38 spiral for this finer detail work. And then you want to add a little white speck right in the black part of the eye to give it the reflection and the lifelike look. For the beak, we're just going to add a little bit of black wool. And it's just going to be a real thin triangle beak here. Just a small beak. They're little birds. And there you can see my multi-needle tool. That one holds 7 needles. I usually use 3 to 4 generally. It helps felt a little bit faster and gives it a smoother finish. I highly recommend getting a multi-needle tool. So the rest of this video is going to be the finer detail work of the bird. So watch along and I'll highlight some of the pieces. So I'm just adding a little bit more color to the bird here. You can see the in spots, you can see through a little bit to the pinkish red underneath the blue. So I added a little bit more wool just to make sure it's not see-through. And now I'm going to blend a little bit of blue and black together for some shading around the eye. After I add a little bit more black to the eye. So this is a little bit of the blue and the black blended together is what I'm working with right now. And I'm just adding a little bit of that to each side of the eye. It gives it a little bit more depth. And the bluebirds are very pretty. They have this orangey, brown, yellowish color on them. And it's generally on their belly and then a little bit up towards their face. Each one is a little bit unique and it depends on the bird. And they have a little bit of a white belly as well. So this color I'm using is a little bit of the like gold color blended with a lighter brown. And now I'm adding part of the wing of the bluebird. So the part coming out the back of the bluebird, that's a tail feather. And then the part I just added that's coming down off the bottom of the bird, that's part of its wing. And just remember to use a little bit of wool at a time. And then I'm going to be working my way down to the tail again, creating more details for the wings. I'm making this wing a little bit bigger. And then I'm gonna add just the tip of the wing that's actually on the other side of this bird. So you see I add a little bit of blue wool first and then a little bit of black on top of it. And then I blended a little bit of that blue and black together again. And that darkens up that tip of the wing. It makes it so it looks like it's on the other side of the bird. And now we're going to start adding more details to these wings. So I'm using a little bit of the lighter brown color, and I'm making thin lines with it. A little bit of brown and the black blended together. So I'm using the 40 spiral needle, and this is the details of each individual feather. So instead of making individual feathers, we're adding these lines to make it look like the individual feathers. So you want to use real thin, small pieces of wool at this point. There's real thin strips. And again, it's a little bit of the light brown and the black blended together. And on the front wing there, I added real long strips, and then on like the back and down to the tail feathers, it's more of an angle. And if you need to, just rewatch the video again to see how I'm adding these details. After adding those lines, I took real thin piece of the blue there and I laid it over top and felted that down again, just real thin so you can see through to those details that we added. A little bit of highlight with the white. On the top of the wing, kind of by its chin, a little bit on the top of its head. And then working on the tail feathers here. So remember they do have a white belly, so I'm adding a little bit of white there to the underside of the tail. And then defining that tail feather a little bit more. So they kind of come to a point. I blended a little bit more blue and black to add a little bit more around the eyes. I generally hop from one spot to the other to think about if I need to add a little bit more here or there while I'm looking at a picture of what I'm working on. And as I go from one spot to the other, then I have time to think about the spot I was just working on to see if I need to add a little bit more of something, change something. The great thing about needle felting is you can always make changes and improve your design. And now we're adding a little bit more shading. Darker colors always are below lighter colors. So next to that front part of the wing, I added that darker brown to make it look like it's underneath that wing. Now, a lot of this is just little bits of shading that I prefer to do. Starting with the whitish blue color on the top of that wing and then making it a little bit darker. And that just shows the depth between the top and the bottom parts of the wing. And I'm adding a few lines with the brownish gold color onto the tail feathers. A little bit of black for shading. And then I'm adding a little bit of black lines. Generally on the wings, they have a upper section of feathers and a lower section of feathers. And the upper section of feathers is a little bit shorter. And so adding just those few black lines makes it look a little bit shorter. So thanks for watching the video. If you have any questions, please comment below. And we'll see you next time. Happy felting!